One of my earliest memories is one that is burned into my brain. I was only around 4 years old when my parents ushered me and my brother into our kitchen pantry in our house in Kansas. My dad and my mom, who was heavily pregnant with my little sister, sat outside of the pantry on the floor of the kitchen, listening to the weather report upgrade our tornado watch to a tornado warning. We sat quietly, waiting, nervous. But thankfully, our area wasn't hit. But that memory has led to a lifelong fascination with these incredible weather formations. That also brings me to a quote from one of my favorite movies of all time. Scientists have been studying tornadoes forever, but still nobody knows how a tornado works. Well, since that movie came out in 1996, we have learned a bit more about tornadoes, but they are still quite enigmatic. Today we are going to look at what we do know about these incredible manifestations of weather, and we will look at the 3 deadliest tornadoes in the U.S. since they began keeping records. My name is Shelby, and this is Merrily Morbid, the channel where we explore all things that are at least a little bit dark. From deadly diseases to natural disasters, from true crime to man-made catastrophes. So if that kind of thing is up your tornado alley, come along and let's get morbid. Before we get to the actual tornadoes, let's talk a bit about them. Now, most Americans will never see a tornado, which is particularly fascinating when you consider that there are around 1,200 tornadoes in the U.S. each and every year, with a majority of them occurring in the spring, which is called tornado season, in an area that is called Tornado Alley. But don't be mistaken, a tornado can pop up in any state at any time. Even Alaska has 4 recorded tornadoes, and Hawaii gets on average 1 a year. Surprised me too. Want to hear another crazy thing? In 2012, a major snowstorm hit the U.S. on Christmas Day. That same storm caused 30 tornadoes to touch down in the southeastern U.S. So they really can happen anywhere at any time. Luckily for the rest of us, most tornadoes only hit a section of the states, which I previously mentioned is called Tornado Alley. It has, in the past, included states like Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Kansas, all the way up to South Dakota. But in recent years, we have been seeing more and more tornadoes appearing east of Tornado Alley in states like Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Mississippi. So why there? Easy, because it's a Goldilocks zone for tornadoes. It's got everything a tornado needs. Now, the formation of a tornado usually begins with a very strong thunderstorm called a supercell. They can be up to 50,000 feet high and have high wind speeds, large hail, lightning, sometimes a lot of rain, which can cause flooding. Okay, but how does it actually happen? Well, don't quote me, but how I understood it is there has to be rising air drafts which are caused by condensation. The more condensation from humid air, the stronger the air drafts are. As the air drafts rise, they can change direction, and when combined with the moisture in the air, can allow the base of the cloud to become huge. When these things all combine, it basically creates a whirlpool effect in the clouds and pulls more air up, creating a funnel that we call a tornado. The air inside of the tornado will be warmer than the air outside, which causes it to become tighter, which causes the wind to increase in speed. Luckily, tornadoes usually don't last that long, usually between 5 and 10 minutes, but the stronger the tornado, the longer it can last. It's not unheard of for the strongest tornadoes to last longer than an hour. Now, a quick mention on a tornado watch versus warning. A tornado watch is just that. You are looking out for a tornado to happen. All the ingredients are there, but it hasn't happened yet. A tornado watch means that there is a tornado and you need to take immediate shelter. Tornadoes can move across the land at a snail's pace, or can almost be frozen in place, all the way up to traveling at a speed of 60 miles per hour. It's a bit comforting to know if you have done the stupid thing and decided to try to outrun it. Don't do that. Don't be stupid. Find a basement or a bathtub or a closet with no exterior walls and just freaking stay there. Now, tornadoes are usually visible because of the condensation, dirt, and debris that it picks up as it moves. But notice that I said usually. Yeah, terrifyingly, if a tornado doesn't pick up dust and debris, and there aren't a lot of water droplets in the funnel, they can be invisible. All right, before we move on to tornadoes, let's talk about tornado classification. In 1971, Dr. Tetsuya Theodore Fujita, who went by Ted, created a scale to classify tornadoes based on the speed of the wind within the funnel. That particular system was in use until 2007, when a new and improved version called the Enhanced Fujita scale was developed. The original scale was a little more crude and didn't take into account damage caused by the tornadoes. The scale ranked from an F0 up to an F5. Finger of God. Any Twister fans out there? I gotta go, Julia. We got cows. No? Well, anyway. The descriptions of each included a descriptor for the wind that accompanied it. Minor, moderate, strong, severe, devastating, and incredible. It also allows a tornado to be better classified retroactively, because the type of damage done will tell you the speed of the winds that did the damage. Now, 93% of tornadoes are classified as F0, F1, or F2. So, minimal damage, such as broken windows, missing shingles, up to roofs being ripped off houses and trees being uprooted. The stronger the storm, the more damage done. Duh. Luckily, less than 1% of tornadoes are classified as F5s, and those ones are easy to identify because it's the type of tornado that leaves nothing behind. You see pictures of what used to be a neighborhood, and all that are left are the foundations. Those areas literally look like war zones. I want to jump in here and ask you to subscribe if you haven't already. I am trying to make this channel my full-time job so that I can bring you more morbid topics more often. I am only at just over 140 when I'm filming this, and my goal is to get to 500 subscribers by the end of next month. So, if you are morbid like me, help me get there by hitting subscribe now. And while you're there, go ahead and hit the like button too. Okay, let's get back to the video. So here we are, the top 3 deadliest tornadoes in recorded U.S. history. Side note, tornadoes only began being officially recorded starting in 1950. So, in third place, we have the 1953 Waco Tornado, which happened on May 11th, 1953. There are a couple things that make this tornado stand out. One, the Waco Tornado is the deadliest tornado in recorded Texas history. And 2, it is the first official F5 tornado in U.S. history, although it was classified retroactively after the Fujita scale was created 20 years later. Just a couple hours before the Waco tornado and 200 miles west, an F4 tornado touched down in San Angelo, Texas. This tornado was vicious in its own right, killing 13 and injuring 153, and destroying over 500 homes during its 20 miles on the ground. But I mention it because it's believed that when that tornado dissipated, it's very possible that it enhanced the severity of the storms moving east. The F5 tornado that followed hit Waco, formed to the south-southwest of Waco, just before hitting the city head-on after 4 p.m. It passed through and dissipated to the north-northeast. It was a third of a mile wide and traveled a total of 23 miles before dying out. It left incredible devastation in its wake. When all was said and done, 114 were dead and 597 people were injured. It destroyed over 600 homes and businesses and damaged over 1,000 others. The damages were calculated at $41 million in 1953. That would be over $481 million today. However, I can say that there was something positive that came from the disaster. It inspired the development of a national weather radar network and began the development of warning systems for severe weather. Today, the network has 158 weather radars between the National Weather Service, Federal Aviation Administration, and the Department of Defense. As the tornado moved through the city, it hit the 6-story R.T. Dennis building, which held a home furnishing store, R.T. Dennis & Co. It had been a very prosperous company and had had very humble beginnings. It actually started in the funeral industry, and it bloomed as it transitioned to home goods like furniture, curtains, rugs, decor, what have you. The business had been in that building for almost 50 years when it all came down. And I mean that literally. When the F5 tornado hit the store, the whole building came down. 22 of the 31 employees there died. Now that sounds horrific enough, but it gets worse. Some of the employees knew that the basement should be the safest place from the tornado. So they rushed in, thinking that everything would be fine, that they would be okay. But as the tornado hit and the building collapsed, debris rained down into the basement, hitting a water pipe. Water rushed out of the pipe, but with the building literally collapsed above their heads, these poor people had nowhere to go. The terror that they must have felt, I cannot even imagine. The last person who was pulled out of the rubble left behind was 70-year-old Lily Matkin, who was also in the R.T. Dennis building where she worked as a switchboard operator. There are pictures of many people trying to get Lily out of the rubble that was once her place of work. They struggled for hours, and around 2:30 in the morning, a power saw was brought in to help get her out. Lily was scared of being so close to the saw, and she let her rescuers know that she wanted them to go slow. She told them, "I've been here for 10 hours. A little longer won't hurt." She was buried in such a way that even with the power saw, it took another 4 hours before they were finally able to reach her. Lily handled such a scary situation with such grace and patience. As they pulled her out, they took off her shoes, and all she had to say about the situation was to ask that they didn't lose her shoes, because in spite of their age, they were comfortable. I am happy to say that she did get her shoes back. But can you imagine staying so calm, being buried in the remains of a building for 14 hours? Incredible resilience. Lily went on to live 16 more years and passed away at the very respectable age of 86. Now we move on to the Flint-Beecher Tornado, which happened on June 8th, 1953, just weeks after the Waco Tornado, and it was just as devastating, having 116 fatalities and 844 injured. 340 homes were destroyed, among the many more buildings that were damaged, and the cost of the damage at that time in 1953 was estimated to be $19 million. That's over $223 million today. The tornado was quite large, at almost half a mile wide, but it slowly moved across the land at only 35 miles an hour, leaving a visible path on the ground, a phenomenon called cycloidal ground scouring. But the real reason that it is remembered is that in its 27 miles on the ground, it killed 97% of its victims on only a 4-mile stretch of road, from Clio Road to Dort Highway. A large factor in the high number of deaths is probably because of the time that it happened, 8:30 p.m. on a Monday night. People were largely at home, possibly even in bed when it hit. There were so many bodies that the local National Guard armory was used as a makeshift morgue. Over 100 people waited outside in the rain until they were able to go inside and identify the bodies. But people were warned before they went inside that many of the deaths were brutal. So the bodies were in terrible condition and that what they would see would be gruesome. 2 families, the Gensels and the Gattacas, each lost 5 family members. Some of the injured people were so hurt that they were in the hospital for months, with 2 people being in the hospital for 5 months before they were finally healthy enough to go home. Some families were terribly unlucky that night, while others were incredibly lucky. Claudius was a man living with the Vaughn family, which included Winfred and Muriel and their 3 children. Claudius and Winfred were at work at the Chevy car plant when the tornado hit their house. When they arrived back home, there was nothing left but the kitchen sink, which they found half a block from the house, or rather, where the house had been. And most tragic, Muriel, who was 29, Jean, who was 9, and Patricia, who was 8, were all gone. Only one of their children survived, although they were severely injured and hospitalized. Then we have the Weeble family. Ralph and Ruth and their children, Ruth Ann, Dale, Michael, and Jerry, ranging in age from 1 to 6 years old, were very lucky the night of the tornado. Normally, Ralph would be at work and the rest of his family would be at home. But a couple weeks before, their eldest child, Ruth Ann, had fallen off a slide and had broken her arm. It hadn't seemed to be healing quite right, so they decided to have her go to the doctors. The appointment was made for that same day. That meant that Ruth had the car that night when she normally didn't, since her husband usually drove himself to work. She dropped him off and figured that since she had the car, they might as well get out of the house for a bit, go socialize. So with that, she loaded her 4 kids in the car and they headed to the other side of town. As it got late and the kids started getting fussy, they headed back home. When they got home, they found that they had narrowly missed what could have been a tragedy. Their house had some damage, but their garage where they kept baby chicks and ducks had been demolished by the tornado. Ruth said that her normal routine during a storm included her going to check on the birds in the garage, so she fully believed that she would have been in the garage when the tornado hit. Turns out that Ruth Ann's unlucky accident probably saved her mother's life. Now we have arrived at the deadliest tornado in U.S. history. If you are interested at all in tornadoes, you already know which one tops the list. Just after 5:30 p.m. on Sunday, May 22nd, 2011, a massive tornado hit the city of Joplin, Missouri. What is surprising is that it had a very short path compared to the other tornadoes that I've talked about. It was on the ground for 46 minutes, but only traveled 6 miles from start to finish. But with a width of over a mile and it hitting such a populated area, it was destined to be the deadliest tornado to hit the U.S. in the last 77 years. It killed 161 people and injured over 1,150 people. It also destroyed over 4,000 homes. But even then, it was concerning how many people were killed when the sirens had been working and they had gone off to warn the people of Joplin. So, an investigator from the National Institute of Standards and Technology traveled to Joplin to look into what went wrong and what could be done to save more lives in the future. one big thing that stood out to the investigator, Erica Kuligowski, was that after interviewing 140 people, they learned that Joplin tested their tornado sirens weekly, and they also had a high rate of false alarms. This created a boy cried wolf type of situation. When it was finally the real thing, the people of Joplin didn't believe that it was real. It was also the path of the tornado that caused so much loss of life. Along the path of the tornado was a hospital, a nursing home, an elementary school, a middle school, a high school. Then there was also a Walmart and a Home Depot. Since the tornado struck around 5:40 on a Sunday, there were only a few people in any of the schools. From what I could deduce is that 9 of the children who died from the tornado were in the high school at the time, along with a parent, who were all killed when the tornado completely flattened the high school. 3 people were killed in Walmart, and 8 were killed at the Home Depot. 10 people were killed at a nursing home, and just as tragically, the hospital, which was standing after the impact, lost power, but for some reason, the backup generator didn't kick on. The main power generator was sucked up by the storm. This resulted in 5 patients who were on ventilators dying. Turns out that tornadoes can kill in a variety of ways. Stephen was just a teenager when the Joplin tornado nearly killed him. He had been out driving around with his friends on what started out as a sunny day. Unfortunately, the weather changed quickly, and before him and his friends could get to safety, the vehicle that they were in was thrown by the tornado. Stephen was critically injured, and once emergency services arrived, they rushed to get him to the hospital. By the time his family got there, Stephen had been stabilized, but learned that he had a massive 15-inch chest wound. It was incredible that he had survived, but his story of his fight to live didn't end there. Over the next few days, it became very clear that something was wrong with him. He had developed a concerning amount of swelling, and his blood pressure was becoming unstable. He was transferred via helicopter to another hospital in Kansas City, 2.5 hours away. And if they were transferring him to another hospital via a life flight, it's dire. When he finally reached that hospital, he was rushed into surgery where they found that his chest wound was massively infected by some kind of mold, which was later identified as mucormycosis, which is a very dangerous fungal infection commonly associated with natural disasters. His chest was filled with mold that was visible to the eye and had caused a good amount of tissue to become necrotic. After more than 20 surgeries to remove the dead tissue, which included parts of his liver, lungs, and even part of his heart, he was finally in the clear. It was another 5 months before he was actually able to go home. And then we go on to talk about 2 people who died who are now remembered as heroes, Dean Wells and Christopher Lucas. Dean Wells helped 40 to 50 people reach the safety of the break room at Home Depot where he worked as the manager of the electrical department. He was already in the break room, the safest area in the building, when he saw a man and his 2 children pull up to the lumber entrance of the building. Dean left that safety and rushed out to help the man and his kids. They were on their way back to the break room just as the tornado hit the building, causing the wall to collapse on top of them. Dean, the man, and his children sadly did not make it. Dean died a hero and left behind his wife and 2 daughters. The other hero is Christopher Lucas, who was only 27 when his act of heroism cost him his life. He was the manager at the Pizza Hut and was rushing to get all of the customers and employees into the walk-in freezer, 19 people. After getting everyone inside, as the tornado hit, he grabbed a bungee cord and was trying to use it to keep the door shut. He was holding on to it with everything that he had in him, but even with the other 2 employees there grabbing onto him to help hold him back, the door flung open, causing the 3 to fly 20 to 30 feet across the room. Only one of the 3 survived. Christopher and the 16-year-old waitress, Kaylee Teal, sadly died from their injuries. Christopher left behind his 2 children and his pregnant fiancée. Both Christopher and Dean were recognized by President Obama as heroes during the memorial service for all the victims of the Joplin tornado. And that's it for today. If you want to see more on the topic of vengeful nature, check out my video, Malevolent Mycology, Fungal Infections. If you haven't already hit the subscribe and like buttons, please do that now. Thanks for watching. Be merry, but stay morbid.